Hello, I'm Brian P., and welcome to Scaling the Well. A while back, I did a podcast on empathy, and I didn't really like the sound quality on it, and it was like I was just trying out new equipment, and I was also going off on some tangents, and also it was empathy is probably a main theme that you're going to see throughout pretty much all of my podcasts in some form or in one form or another. So I decided to redo it. And this time I'm going to kind of just break it down in a very simple and basic manner. And what I really want you to get out of it is just how important empathy is, and not only how important it is, but what it isn't, and how we can use it in our everyday lives. And it's so important because, well, the number one reason is that, of all the billions of people on this planet and all the interactions that happen, second to second, even nanosecond to nanosecond, are all going to involve, two or more people. And how we treat people and how we're able to get to a point to where we want to treat people how we want to be treated is just so important, but it's also powerful. So you could even say that I preach empathy because I talk about it so much when I'm doing, in lecture halls and churches, talking to my friends even, because it is such a powerful part of humanity. And if you use it right, you can master so many different things. And even if you're a selfish person, and we'll get into that a little bit later, but it's really good. So to start off with, I broke it down into kind of three principles. I call it the sword, the shield, and the chain. That's what empathy is. Empathy, sword, shield, and chain. And these three concepts are kind of what are all the kind of things that are important about empathy, and kind of they're the tool sets that come under empathy, but they're just different branches. So first, a little bit about empathy. Empathy and sympathy are two different things. And a lot of people, when they hear the word empathy, and this is one stereotype or one misconception that I want to do away with, is that empathy is just for like bleeding hearts. There's some people who don't deserve empathy. Let me put one thing out there. Everybody deserves empathy. Now you say, well, what about an evil person? What about like a serial killer or whatever? Yes, they deserve empathy too. Not for their sake, but it helps you deal with that type of person. If you run into a serial killer, you better have empathy. If you're not incredibly trained in martial arts or an escape artist or have a gun, you better have empathy, because that might be your only way to survive. That's one thing. The second thing is that you want to be able to understand people who do horrible things in the world. And if you have empathy, sometimes you can even prevent those people from becoming those people. So empathy does not mean no consequences. So, I've talked about, my past working in child welfare, where, we'd have to remove children. And of course, there's always two sides, well, probably even more than two, but that have an opinion on what child welfare is and what it should be, and what it's doing and what it's not doing and what it should be doing. But we get into that in other podcasts. But I would say, a lot of people they'll always come up to me and say, wow, must be such a hard job, seeing kids who are abused or neglected. And, yeah, it can be. But I would also say that I had empathy for every single parent that I removed a child from. And that's important to understand, because if you don't have empathy, you can't do the job. You can't be a police officer. You can't be a CPS social worker. You really can't even be a customer service rep at Target if you don't have some amount of empathy. And so why would you have empathy for someone who abused their kid? Well, one, again, it doesn't mean there's no consequences. It helps you understand, because under any state child welfare system, done, especially in California, but for the most part, their primary goal is reunification. So you're always, as soon as you remove that child, reunification begins. And it's very rare that reunification is just called off altogether. And usually that's like, with a parent who's already lost kids and those kids have been adopted out and they failed to reunify before. But when somebody, or like a kid's going, like the parents are going to prison for 10, 20 years or whatever. But usually the criminal system moves slower than we are. So it's oftentimes, we could do whatever we do in the child welfare system, and then the criminal system will come in and redo everything. So, but that's another podcast. But you have to be able to understand that if you don't feel that empathy, if you don't understand it, and I'd say the vast majority of the parents that we dealt with had some kind of trauma in their lives that led them to this path, or some type of upbringing to where they were either, and I'm going to use the word uneducated. And when I say that, uneducated or not educated, I never mean scholastically, unless I, specifically mention that. I mean social education, to where certain things are acceptable to them that are not acceptable to the masses. And they didn't have that. And so if you can understand that, then you can see that, well, this situation is fixable. It's a salvageable situation. Therefore, you can do your job as far as reunification. If you don't have empathy, you're never going to get to that. You're not even going to ask the right questions to see what the issues are. And so I learned that, and then I realized you could apply that to things outside of social work. So let's start with that. Let's start with, the sword. So empathy as a sword. You can use it in very selfish ways. And when I say selfish, I don't necessarily mean evil. I mean something that is just for personal gain. So people who are great at sales have empathy. They're able to see what other people need, what other people want. They're able to listen. And then they can gather that information and then use that to get the other person to make a purchase, And a lot of people, again, they think it's a soft science, you talk about the behavioral sciences, but empathy, when you really think about it, what are the algorithms that Google and Facebook are using? They're getting information about you, without your knowledge sometimes, or at least without you paying attention to them, getting your information. They're compiling it in a certain way to put something on the screen that you might click on. And that click, and you multiply that over 100 million people who are active to any of those sites at any given time, could generate billions of dollars. And you as a person with empathy are basically doing the same thing. You're gathering information, and that information you might not even know you're gathering. Some people are just naturally empathic. They're just gathering this information. It could be body language. It could be just the words you say, and they're able to give you a response that is amenable to you, that's something you like, and it's just the way they talk and everything. It's very alluring, and you're able to get what you want out of them. So again, salespeople have to have great empathy. Great salespeople have great empathy. Politicians have a high level of empathy, because they're able, even if they're only targeting a specific demographic in marketing, they call it STP, segment, target, and position. And that's the main thing for any type of marketing plan, is when you go after a specific segment of the population, target them, and then you can push a particular product in that market. And then that creates your market. And then, now it might repulse other markets, right? Your market might be, let's just say, Native Americans between the ages of 15 and 35 who like kickboxing. Okay, well, if you live in an area, if you operate in an area that has that population, and you have 50,000 of people who fit that demographic, and you can market in such a way that they are all coming to you to get your one product, you're going to be rich, even though that's not even the majority of the people in the country. It's enough to make you as an individual a lot of money. And that's what they do. And that's what cigarette companies were accused of doing for decades. And I apologize, I'm getting over a cold. So even though I wanted to improve the sound quality, I don't know how much it's going to be improved, but I'll clear my throat. So yeah, it's very dynamic, that the way you could use it, and then there's the unfortunate um, circumstances of pimps and even drug dealers to some extent, and then the criminal elements that use empathy in order to actually get other people to do what they want to do, and they profit off other people. That's a horrible thing. And if you start studying the pathology, take a course of pathology, or read a book on it. It's fascinating. There's thousands of books on it, of deviant behavior. And you look at pedophiles. Why is it that this one pedophile was getting away with it for so many years? They could always. It's not that every kid will fall for the, let's say the stereotype, getting the van type of thing. Most kids won't. Why is it that they can always find the one who will? That's the question. And unfortunately, that's part of empathy too. And like I said, it could be used, for personal gain. And sometimes the people who use those gangs are not good people. So now we're going to get into the shield, because we have to protect ourselves from those people, right? So empathy as a shield allows you to, first of all, it protects you from, let's just use the street terms, to protect you from the haters, right? If you understand what other people are doing or other people are saying and what other people need, your self-esteem and your self-confidence is bolstered. So if somebody is attacking you or bullying you, and that could be you as a kid, or it could be you as an adult at work, where you have that one person who's just constantly picking apart your work, just because they think that, if they bring you down, that somehow elevates them. And unfortunately, that's a theme in modern society. They don't think that the pie gets bigger. They just think that if you're doing well, somehow you're stealing their piece of the pie. With empathy, you understand first that that's not true, and you can see through them. You understand what they're doing, and if you have really good empathy, you could reverse it. You could reverse it to a point to where they actually become your friend, and they like you, even if it's fake. But you're actually now using them instead of them trying to use your misfortune against you. They're actually saying, "Oh, you're an ally," because those people are insecure, and if you can recognize that a person, even if they have a lot of power, is insecure. Again, it's like a pimp playing on a prostitute. You could use those insecurities against them, but you need empathy to do that. It's the key. And I know that I'm bringing up some horrible examples and some dark examples, but I guess I wanted to get you away from the thought of empathy as just for, people who are crying in a corner. It's like they just feel bad for everybody. Empathy is not feeling bad for someone. Like if you saw an animal injured on the road, you feel bad for that animal, but you don't understand what it is to be an injured dog on the side of the road. You understand pain, but you don't understand what it's like to be a dog. You don't understand what it's like to be a dog in pain, what that dog's thinking. That dog could be thinking anything. That's why some dogs will bite somebody that's trying to help them, because they're not humans. And I think the most important point is that when you feel sorry for somebody, that's sympathy. And sympathy and empathy are very different things. If you listen to the last podcast on enabling, that's sympathy. Enablers have a lot of sympathy for people, and sympathy is not good. I mean, it's not bad, but if you live your life through sympathy, it's not good, because when you have sympathy, you're basically not looking at the other person as an equal. When you see a dog hurt on the side of the road, you're not looking at him as an equal. You feel bad for that dog, and you might want to help the dog. But there's a good chance, 50-50, you might just keep on driving. It depends on, if you got places to go, But if you saw an injured person on the side of the road, you're going to at least call, right? I think the average person would at least call 911 or do something, because you look at that person as another person. You look at them as equal to you. Therefore, empathy kicks in. And it's like you still might have some sympathy for him, but you don't know what's going on. You start questioning, like, how could a person be injured on the side of the road? Like, was he in a fight? Did he get hit by a car? What happened? So you start wanting to know more about them. And so it's kind of like a little shock of empathy that hits you, and you actually go into action. And so like as a shield, when you could see what other people are doing, even if they're they have the ability to kind of put you in a bad mood. And again, I don't say that anyone can make you do anything. I think you could control yourself, but it allows you that armor, the armor of insight, let's say, that you know what they're doing, you know what they're after. Therefore, you're the one with the actual power now, and the ball's now in your court. So, so that's shield, and then we get into chain. And if you think of a chain, you know it's something that's sturdy, but it's something that's long, and it has multi-purposes, and you can do a lot of things with it. When it comes to empathy, I think the one thing is it could pull yourself out. So just like the person who made you feel bad, or if you're depressed, it could pull you out of the hole. You could use that chain. You climb up that chain, you get out of it. Why? Because you're benchmarking now. So a lot of people wonder why my podcast is called Scaling the Well. Well, it's basically based off an old Chinese proverb or a folktale about the frog who was in the well. And when he looks up, basically, and there's many versions of this story, but basically he could only see the sky. So he thinks that's the entire earth. It's that little circular, clouds or whatever that are above the well at any given time. That's, to him, is his perspective on the world. And I think that's one of the problems we have, is that all of us are in these little wells, right? We're in these silos, and that frog doesn't know that there are millions of other wells in the world. There's frogs that don't live in wells. There's frogs that live in, on lakes, and frogs that, live, in people's backyards, and what are people, So if he just got out of the well, his perspective would grow, his understanding would grow, his knowledge would grow, and he would be a greater frog for it. So scaling the well, it basically applies to all of us, coming out of our wells. And empathy is a chain that we can use to climb some of those wells. So if you find yourself feeling like you're in a place where you're stuck, whether it's in your career, whether it's in your relationship, it could even be with your family, we get stuck because we always look at things from inside the bubble. And we're going to do a whole podcast on bubbles. I'm fascinated with bubbles. You have, the poverty bubble. You have, some people even have like ethnic bubbles, like the black bubble, the Asian bubble. And, but yeah, we always look at our own bubbles from, the inside looking out. And we never even try to imagine what it looks like from the top down. So some of the things that you would do is people think, well, why would you do that for that person? That person's never done anything for you. And then you're like, no, I got to, then you get into an enabling thing, or sometimes there's just things that you do and you're just like, well, that's just the way me and my family have always done it. And you've never thought to innovate. And innovation, is great in business. It's also great in relationships. Empathy is taking that chain and climbing outside the bubble and looking and taking a bird's eye view at your own life and at your own circumstances. And it's powerful. And so, and not only is it powerful as far as getting a better vantage point, when you also use empathy as a chain, it also helps you bond yourself to others. So if you can see, again, if you could put yourself into another person's shoes, another person's place, and you can see their needs and their strengths and things that they're not so strong. I use the word weaknesses because it's convenient sometimes, but I like to say that there are no weaknesses. There are only untimely strengths. So you see the people's untimely strengths, right? Things that pop up at the wrong moments and get them in trouble, or put them in situations that they don't like. And when you have that, again, it's about gathering information, right? That if there's nothing more you understand about empathy, just understand that it's the ability to gather information on another sentient creature, right? And since we don't have proof of aliens, basically we're talking about other humans for now. When you get information about other humans, in a natural, organic way, by speaking to them and you know how to do this, it becomes almost like a dance. It becomes almost like a metaphysical martial art, so to speak. Someone makes a move, you know when to duck, you know when to counter. You see all the punches coming. And so we one of the first things we teach kids in martial arts is if you go to a parking lot and there's two people going crazy, yelling at each other, screaming at each other. Well, what do? Well, if you're just a bystander, you probably just watch and put it on World Star Hip Hop, hoping for a knockout. Somebody's going to get wrecked. If you're a police officer, probably going to call for backup, and both of them are going to go face down in the dirt and get cuffed, and hopefully no one gets seriously injured. But let's say one person is standing there and he's gathering information and he or she is quiet and the other person's the one going crazy, getting all in the face. Well, who are you more likely to talk to? Whose side of the story is going to come out first? Now, sometimes we think, well, the person who's yelling is side of the story. No, because people aren't listening to the person yelling. They want that person to calm down. That person's a threat. The person who's calm is like, hey, come over here. Once it's broken up, the police are going to talk to you first if you're the calm one. The storekeeper, the other people in there, they're going to be like, yeah. And then there's going to be people who are like, just came on the scene and all they're going to say is, hey, I just saw this guy getting in this other person's face and I don't know what he was going to do. The other person wasn't saying anything. Sometimes that's enough to just get you out of that situation. And that other person is going to be the one who's going to be on the hook for jail or whatever. And even if you are both in the wrong, people are more likely to side with you. And if you have good empathy, you're going to also have good control, and that's important, and that's why we train kids, because if you could get out of those type of situations without throwing a punch, without throwing a kick, without getting a takedown, without choking somebody, that's optimum, right? The best self-defense is not having to fight at all. So there's that, and then yes, as far as your bonds, your relationships, the chains that are between people, between you and your family members, your mom, your dad, your sisters, your brothers, and your friends, this ever expanding network of chains, you're going to be able to master them and navigate them. And so if you start concentrating on your empathy, more and more people are going to start to look to you as a problem solver, because they're going to think that you have all this wisdom. And it's not that you have wisdom, it's just that you have an understanding of people, and you have customized understanding with each one of these individuals. And that makes you very powerful. And you could use that for ill, or you could use that for good, And, some people use it and they just become really great daters, because if you have a good empathy, man, you could talk to, somebody that you're attracted to, whether it's, whether you're a man or a woman, doesn't matter. And those people will start to trust you more than other people. And that's kind of going back to Sword, where you're into sales and into emotional, I don't want to say manipulation, but I would say that it's emotional navigation. And they trust you, and that's important, and that's so powerful in this world. So there you have it. It's kind of in a nutshell. Empathy, sword, shield, and chain. It's a short podcast today, but I think it's worth it. Remember to subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.